Justin and I were watching that first game against the Warriors this season for the Jazz, and there was a commercial for Call of Duty Black Ops that just had Draymond Green's head on, like, it just had gameplay.
Oh, yeah.
Has his head he's just going, just punching people. And then now it's like, oh, Draymond is just
all too close to home.
Technical foul, Draymond. I was like, that is awesome.
That is really
so
incredible.
Good. Yeah.
You're ready to do this.
Anyway, sports podcast sometime, apparently. But,
I wish we had the HBO thing.
Yeah.
There was not enough incest in these episodes, let me tell you. I'm just kidding.
I'm looking forward to your rundown. This is
me too.
Oh, man.
All right.
Winter is coming.
Where are my dragons?
In the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die.
The things I do for love.
A Lannister always pays his debts.
Chaos is a ladder.
Hodor.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
We
We are the Rewatchers on the wall. Game of Thrones, episodes 4 through 8.
5 through 8.
That's 5 through... Shoot, I messed it up already. My name is Mitchell Marshall, and I suck at opening a podcast.
And that was a red line.
And, I do that. Yeah, I'm really bad at those. I'm here with Tyler Harris and Tyler McKinley, here to take you through some Thrones in preparation for the new season. Let me just, before we give you the summary, here are the best lines from these 4 episodes. But I love him, and I meant to be his queen and have his babies. 7 hells. Don't worry, I'll find you someone brave and strong. I don't want someone brave and strong. I want him.
Are you just doing this whole scene?
Yeah.
I just wanted
all from one scene.
That was a summarized bit of that one scene.
I think that was all one scene, but those lines were out of order.
They were mostly in order.
It was like a montage. It was just a montage of one scene.
Just imagine Joffrey's face and say, I'm doing it right now. I love him, and I meant to be his queen and have his babies.
I love... Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that, because I love that that's like an epiphany moment that, like, breaks the mystery for Ned Stark in that moment. It's pretty great. Because, like, right after that, he's like, wait a minute, he does have blonde hair.
Yeah, that's what helps him figure out that it's Jaime's kid. Spoiler alert. Just so you know, we will be spoiling what happens in these episodes, but not much further on, because Tyler is brand new to Game of Thrones, and he is going to go ahead and... also... If you can watch Game of Thrones, you can listen to this podcast. But if Game of Thrones is inappropriate in your eyes, so will this podcast be. Tyler's going to go ahead and give us an episode summary of 5 through 8, Season 1, GOT, go.
Okay. Sir Hughes... shit. I already fucked it up. Okay.
He was ready to go as fast as he could.
Okay, let's try this again. Sir Hugh may have killed Jon Arryn. Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, unseats the Mountain in the tournament, and then the Mountain cuts off his horse's head and attacks Loras. The Hound intervenes. Catelyn is not taking Tyrion to Winterfell. While not taking Tyrion to Winterfell, they are attacked by brigands. Catelyn unties Tyrion, and he saves her life rather than fleeing. Bronn is impressed. Theon sleeps with a prostitute, but doesn't pay for it. Guess he's just that good. Varys tells Ned that Jon was killed because he was asking questions. While Arya is hunting cats, she hears Varys talking to the Targaryen guy about killing Ned. Varys and Littlefinger have a gossip off. Ned learns Catelyn is taking Tyrion prisoner, tells everyone it was his idea. Robert goes to the council because he wants to kill Daenerys and her unborn child. Ned says no and also steps down his hand to the king. He's getting ready to flee King's Landing when Littlefinger tells him he needs to go show him something. Catelyn takes Tyrion to Lady Arryn's keep, the Eyrie. Robert Arryn is a 6-year-old breastfeeding sociopath with attention issues. Tyrion is thrown in a cell with 3 walls and 3,000-foot drop to freedom. Loras manscapes Renly and tells him he should be king. Cersei and Robert have a heart-to-heart. Robert is worried about going to war. Ned Stark finds another Baratheon bastard in the brothel. Jaime confronts Ned about Tyrion as he is leaving the brothel, kills all his men, including Jory Castle, fights Ned until one of his men intervenes, stabbing Ned in the thigh. Jaime flees the city. Robert and Cersei visit Ned. Robert still wants Ned to be hand, and he wants Ned to tell Catelyn to free Tyrion. Daenerys doesn't burn her hands on the dragon eggs. Bran dreams about a 3-eyed raven again, and then gets a horse wheelchair. Theon tells Robb a real man would go to war with the Lannisters. Bran goes off alone and is accosted by north of the wall wood urchins. Robb fights, but ultimately has to be saved by Theon, then takes a wildling woman prisoner. Shit, I lost my place. Sorry. Rob fights, but ultimately has to be saved by Theon. They take a wildling woman prisoner. Syrio teaches Arya how to talk to the one true god Death. Daenerys eats a horse heart. Viserys is jealous, and she names her son Rhaego. Viserys tries to steal the dragon eggs, but is stopped by Jorah. Tyrion gets an audience with Lady Arryn by bribing Mord with the concept of abstract gold. Tyrion confesses, then demands a trial by combat. Bronn fights as his champion and wins. Tyrion is free. Robert goes hunting. The Lannisters are attacking the Riverlands. Ned sends soldiers to make them answer for their crimes. Viserys is drunk and stupid, and he finally gets his golden crown. Lol. Tywin is not pleased with Jaime. Ned tells Cersei he knows Joffrey is Jaime's and that he should leave King's Landing before Robert finds out. We see the pilot episode of Littlefinger's misguided casting couch / memoir series. The wildling cryptically tells Theon about the dangers north of the wall. Benjen Stark's horses return to the walls Benjenless. Robert was attacked by a boar. In private, he writes a decree with Ned to make him protector of the realms after his death. Ned writes the words rightful heir instead of Joffrey's name. Robert has second thoughts about killing Daenerys. Was Jorah part of the assassination plot? Daenerys is almost poisoned. Jon graduates, gets assigned a desk job, and takes his oath with Sam, while Ghost finds a cold hand. Renly makes a move for the throne. Littlefinger wants Ned to say sorry to the Lannisters. Khal Drogo declares war on the Seven Kingdoms after the assassination attempt. Joffrey sits on the throne, and Littlefinger betrays Ned. Syrio Forel teaches the Lannisters that capes are not good for war, and continues the fight as Arya escapes after killing a stable boy. The Hound comes for Sansa and brings her to Cersei, who helps her write a letter to Winterfell telling Robb he needs to recognize Joff as king. Mormont and Jon Snow drink together. Robb gets the letter and gets an army together to march on King's Landing. Lisa Arryn will not help Robb. Bronn and Tyrion are accosted by brigands. Jon attacks Alistair Thorne. Ghost leads Jon to a zombie in Mormont's quarters. Daenerys sees how war works, doesn't like it, and claims a ton of women as slaves. Khal Drogo asserts dominance. Robb feasts with the Lords of the North, and his direwolf bites off two of Lord Umber's fingers. Bran prays, the wildling warns of trouble beyond the wall, and Hodor asserts dominance. Sam drops some knowledge about the White Walkers we keep hearing about. Robb meets up with his mom. She's ready to fight the Lannisters. Westeros North is kind of like the real-life South. Tyrion meets up with his dad, who is getting ready to leave and fight Robb. The brigands say Tyrion has to fight until they are paid. The Starks catch a Lannister spy, and Robb lets him go and sends a message to Tywin. Cersei forces Barristan Selmy to retire, and Joff names Jaime as commander of the King's Guard, and Sansa kneels before the throne to plead for Ned's life, and he will be spared if he recognizes Joff as king.
That is just beautiful. You went double your time, but
yeah, we'll figure that out.
You're about 4:04, but if you wanted to a couple stumbles, you might have been at 3:30.
I mean, I'll take the 4 minutes. You do a phenomenal job at those.
So, episode 5 through 8, we're kind of into the crux of it. A lot of these things you kind of see building. It's amazing because I think that this show is pretty faithful to the book, but at the same time, like, things happen fast. Like, in some future seasons, there are some journeys from one part of Westeros to another that take forever, but a lot of movement happens in these first few episodes.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Tyler, I want to start with your, this is your first watch. You have read that book. Mm-hmm. What are your first, what things stick out to you as really well done, or what's getting you intrigued by the show?
I think that, like, especially these last few episodes, we're seeing a lot more diverse places, like different places, like the place that stuck out to me was the Eyrie, which is Lisa. Is it Lisa? Lisa. I pronounce all these names absolutely
it's like lice
wrong.
with an A at the end.
Right. That actually helps me visualize the character as well. But her like stronghold is pretty rad, and I think they do a really good job with that. I mean, the moon. Gosh, why can I not remember what they call it?
The moon door?
The moon door,
Make
yes.
the man fly!
Oh my gosh. I just wanted to throw that kid like that guy threw that girl in Blade. That's
there are already two young males in this show that everyone is okay with you saying, man, I want to throttle that child.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of like really cool things, and there are some things that I'm liking more in the show than I did in the book, particularly the character of Bronn, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But
he's the LeBron of the show.
LeBron, yeah.
LeBron.
But yeah, I really like a lot of the character choices and casting is so good in this show. We talked about that a little bit last time. Like, Sean Bean is... Who else would you get
Sean
to,
Penn.
like... Get out.
Like,
Get out. I thought you had a future as a casting director. Then you said something like that. But yeah, it's that stuff is kind of what's standing out to me about the show, and that's like really fun. That's where I'm having the most fun, I feel like, is is seeing a lot of those things. So
I think in a show that chemistry can be taken to another level from dialogue. Not that George R. R. Martin's not a wonderful detailed writer, but you talked about Bronn and his relationship with Tyrion is gold and something that is enhanced by the screen.
yeah, for sure.
Is there anything that you are curious about that they did differently, or you're disappointed in, or you're just confused by?
There were a couple things. I know that it's been a while since I read the book, so I don't remember all the details of like Jon Arryn's death.
Right.
So when they kind of introduced the idea that Sir Hugh might have was maybe paid to kill Jon Arryn, and that's why he had such cool armor before he was killed.
And became a knight like immediately
Right.
after.
Oh yeah. He was knighted after that. And I had totally forgotten about that. Because I'm like, I know why I know what John found out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not like following that mystery as intently. I feel like
Anticipation's not there.
yeah. But yeah. So there's little details like that are really sticking out to me. I'm excited to see more of the Bran stuff because I remember those being some of my favorite parts in the book. I guess I'll see in a little bit if they do, because I remember there's a point where the cousins come and stay at Winterfell in the book. Do you remember that?
Are you talking about the orphans? Or are you talking about the? I don't know how to. I don't want to spoil anything.
Do you know? I think it's actually like some of the many kids of Catelyn's dad, or I don't know. I'm in the weeds.
Shut up.
I don't know.
See.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well,
So we'll see.
the characters I'm thinking you're talking about, which I won't mention because it is much later.
Yeah.
They're very different in the book.
Okay.
Than they are in the show.
Okay.
They're still the same characters technically, but they're very different.
Yeah, I just remember as the Bran storyline in the book. There's
Yeah.
someone that comes to Winterfell. I don't know, but I'm interested to see a lot of that, how that stuff plays out, because they're kind of touching on that. The Three-Eyed Raven looks real cool. I think that's kind of fun. But yeah, and then the stuff on the wall I think is enhanced too.
You know how I know you're a more mature reader than I am? I feel like those are like Bran and the Wall are the things smart people and people who are really interested in story like are more intrigued by. And everything I was like, this is boring. Get me back to the good places. But on my second rewatch, I'm so much more now that I know everyone's name.
Yeah.
Like that's an advantage you have. I think it's pretty hard if you watch Game of Thrones completely cold. Like just remembering all the
the
faces
first two
and
episodes
names.
are like, what?
Yeah.
Like
There's
it's a
so
mess.
many old men with short white hair that I was like, I don't remember which
It's like
one
the
this
Maesters
is.
are Nurse Joy from Pokemon. They're all just the same old white dude.
that's the best comparison I've
Go
ever
to school. They all just say the same thing. Yeah.
Fun note, maybe you already know this. I took me a while to realize it. Maester Pycelle, who I freaking hate and want him.
Okay, which Maester is
In
he?
King's Landing.
King's
Okay,
Landing, one of the
King's
small
Landing, okay.
council who should be stabbed.
Yeah, he's the worst.
He plays General Veers in Empire Strikes Back. He's the AT-AT commander.
Oh my goodness! I'm
Yep.
gonna have to go back and like
he's really
watch
young.
the scenes a little bit. Yeah,
well,
that's
not
crazy.
really young, but a lot younger than that.
Yeah,
And like, it's weird. As I watch that show now, I'd be like, it's freaking General Veers. That's
Yeah.
weird.
that is nuts.
But,
I
yeah.
never would have put that together.
No.
Yeah, I don't remember when I did, but
I will say, not having seen Tywin Lannister a lot, like you see him like
yeah.
once or twice, there was a point where I was like, I kept thinking that Barrister Selmy was Tywin Lannister. I was like, I was like, him and Ned are way chummier than I thought they would be. And then like later in the scene, he finally said his name. I was like, okay, yeah, that's not him. But because we've only seen Tywin Lannister like before these episodes like once in passing.
at that one point,
Very briefly.
no,
with Robert and Jamie, like that scene. where
no, that wasn't him.
Oh, see, yeah,
That was
I-
Barristan
you're right.
Selmy.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
probably
see
why
him
I
yet.
thought that.
Where they're talking about their first kill.
Yep, that's absolutely.
Yeah.
See, that's why I thought it was him.
No, have you
I've seen him now.
you seen him now where he's
Yeah.
skinning the deer?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, because that's his intro scene, which I think is a phenomenal intro scene
yeah,
for that character.
it's really good.
And it's excellent. And you just realize how important the legacy is to him. He kind of like it picks apart his son, but is also like there's a certain amount of respect and a certain amount of pride that just has to come with like his son that he hates. He's about to kind of he wanted to go to war anyway, but he is kind of going to war with Tyrion as that centerpiece. And he's very interesting. And that is you have two pretty big monologues with weird set pieces in the happening. The other one is a horror audition. And so it was just those scenes counter each other in the most hilarious way. He's shedding a deer, and then Littlefinger's just talking while these two whores.
How did you word it in your?
I called it the pilot of Littlefinger's misguided casting couch / memoir series.
Oh boy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, there's just once again those cringy sex scenes, and
That was an HBO one to the point where that is the most, not just gratuitous, but I was like, is this...
That scene is incredibly long.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
and
very
that
long.
character Roz the whore isn't in the books at all.
Yeah.
She was made for the show.
She was part of there's a brief moment where there's someone from the books that she takes a moment from, but other than that,
Yeah.
she's a complete... Yeah. And
'Cause
there's a bunch of
She's now
those.
going down to be with Tyrion, right? Or something?
No,
Or is
that-
gonna get
She just
involved
wants
with
to...
Tyrion?
She just knows...
Okay,
She's like...
that's what I was wondering, because I
No,
feel like
Roz
I
is the
haven't-
redheaded whore in the couch scene.
I know that, but I was wondering if she was replacing
Oh,
that character, because
There,
we haven't seen
there
that
are
character
going to
yet,
be
so I was
characters that
wondering.
kind of combine a couple of characters from
I
the
forgot
books.
that. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I forgot you had read the book, and yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But Roz, she... I don't know her full purpose as just give us a glimpse into the life of a whore, because this is a Littlefinger scene, but
It also
she
lets us
comes
see
down
that-
from Winterfell,
Yeah,
which is
we-
interesting.
Like, the stuff in Winterfell, it at least... I don't know, I actually kind of like the stuff that her character does, because it's a lot of, like,
So do all men.
pushing...
Hey!
a lot of it's just pushing Theon.
Yeah, that scene with her and Theon, how she keeps undercutting his arrogance is very telling about him.
And when she's leaving King's Landing, and she's basically like, listen, Winterfell's screwed, because they're going to try to go to war with the Lannisters, the richest people in the whole world.
Yeah.
They're basically going to march to Jeff Bezos' house. And he's going to kill them with his drone army.
When America fractures, Gates and Bezos are going to choose sides.
And Gates will be Ned Stark for sure. But it does kind of help paint a picture of what is happening to the more common folk, I
Yeah.
think, because this show is so focused on the royalty. It does need those windows into like the
That's a good
lower
point.
class of
There
people,
are
and like what
times
is actually going
when
on.
they demonstrate that well, like, oh freak, what's his name? The one who is the cuckold for Daenerys. What is his name?
The cook for Daenerys? Is that what you just said?
Jorah? Are you talking about Jorah?
Jorah, yeah. No,
The cook?
Cuckold.
Oh.
yes, I didn't want to repeat it. The ultimate friend zone guy who's like, will stand there and just to be close to her no matter what she's doing. Anyway, he kind of says, because she's given by Master Allure the false impression that, like, under the breath, the commoners are whispering for the Targaryens to come back. And he's like, the common people do not care who's in charge. They want to survive and farm and do their thing. And I think I, as a reader and a watcher, definitely lose sight of that big time sometimes, that, like, most of these people are going to get killed for causes they really could not care less about. And like the Starks, as much as they represent the good guy for parts, they are still like this.
They're just as guilty.
They're just, they're this high-minded. They're playing a Game of Thrones where let's say 99% of the population doesn't care who really wins this. They just fight for one side because they want peace.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you see that with like, once Catelyn knows that Tyrion was possibly involved in attempting to kill her son, like, she kind of throws all caution to the wind by taking him prisoner in that tavern. You know what I mean? That does have those repercussions for like the people that actually live in Winterfell and all that. So, but yeah, do we want to talk about who's winning at this point?
Let's sure. There's no bad time.
I'll start. I think for me, the winner of these episodes is Tyrion. Because holy crap, that guy can talk his way out of anything. Like, he is these episodes specifically are basically just a series of Tyrion falling out of a frying pan into another frying pan and then into another frying pan. Like, every time that he gets out of a situation, he falls into something else. But because basically, so I'll just start with him. I mean, he's kidnapped by Catelyn at the end of the last episodes we watched, and she is now taking him to her sister because she also believes that he was involved in the murder of Jon Arryn, who is her sister's husband, hand to the king previous to Ned Stark. Anyways, and he has a lot of great lines. Like he's basically trying to talk. He's like, why are you doing that? He's like, you guys are really dumb for doing this. And at one point, one of the soldiers with Catelyn is like, can I gag him? And he's like, why? Because I'm making a lot of sense. It's like, that is who Tyrion is. Like, he is the pragmatist to end all pragmatists in this world, for sure. But I think the thing I like about Tyrion, and it's also the same thing I like about Arya, is that they tend to attract people who have a genuine interest in them and a genuine loyalty to them. It's not a loyalty to their family necessarily, but like they tend to draw people to them that are going to help them because they like them. You know what I mean? I think about Syrio Forel with Arya, which it could just be that he's an incredibly awesome guy, but I think that he very clearly sees something in her and like
is willing to fight 5 guys with metal swords with a wooden sword for her very quickly.
Right. And the same thing happens. I mean, like Tyrion, even as a prisoner on that trip to
the Eyrie.
Gosh, yeah, the Eyrie. Sorry, there's so many names. Starts to develop that friendship with Bronn, which is ultimately what enables him to get free from the Eyrie later. With Bronn fighting as his champion. And then after that, him and Bronn are walking, and they're accosted by those guys from the woods. I'm not entirely clear on what they are, who they're affiliated with. Are they just
I don't know their history. They're the Hill Tribes. They're essentially like outlaw. Like I'm certain there's some huge backstory of like some ancestor being banished, but not
there is,
and starting something in the woods. But they're just kind of like the savages of the Vale, and
they can't penetrate the Eyrie, and so they kind of run wild. But then the Knights of the Vale kind of have them in check, and they're very much wild men, and they get endeared to Tyrion, and Tyrion always like plays up the sex and money, and that's kind of his go-to. But the way he talks them into it, and then the way he interacts with them, he endears himself. He puts himself on their same page, like, hey, we both really just want life and sex and money, and that's what we have in common. And then, like, gosh, yeah, let's be besties.
Yeah. Well, and he uses the tools at his disposal. That's the thing about Tyrion, is like he always uses what he has. I mean, the stuff with Mord,
and his relationships
Mord
pay
is
off.
A freaking weird ass character.
Why would you let that man run your prisons?
Well, also, honestly, I was watching it. I was like, this is the only man in the world that would be like, I would love to run the prison of Lysa Arryn. Like, this is a great place for me to be. But like that, all those scenes where he is trying to convince him, you know, he's like, I have gold, and he has to explain to him the concept of like, I don't have the gold now, but it's still mine. Like, I still have it, and like trying to explain that is really great.
Well, it's like he knows the person he's trying to convince what they want.
Yeah.
He like I'm just saying, he finds whatever common ground he can with them, and then he finds whatever they desire, and then presents that to them in whatever way he can provide that, or trick them into thinking that he can provide that. Whether that be with Mord, that he can get him gold, with the Hill Tribes, that you can take back the Vale from the family of Arryn. Like,
you can get I'll give you a bunch of weapons and armor, basically, if you and that's and there's also times where he knows what to do to help people too, because like I think about the stuff with Jon Snow when he like we talked about in the episodes before, where he gets there and he thinks all the other people there are terrible, and then you know, Tyrion kind of subtly lets him know their backgrounds and where they're coming from, as opposed to where Jon Snow is coming from. And like there are those moments also with Tyrion that are really interesting. Like he's just one of those characters. He seems invincible to me at this point, because of how many situations we've seen him get into and out of. And I'm just excited to see like what's next for that, you know.
Yeah.
And he's best friends with Bronn, who, like you said, is a really fun character, and you felt was improved from what you knew of him in the books.
Yeah.
And then were there any negatives that you saw, like changes or characters that you're just bored with, not intrigued yet with?
I mean, I am I'm real bugged by anytime Sansa's on screen at this point. I will say that. Honestly, there's so many other characters that I'm just interested in finding out about. Like, I know the Hound and the Mountain become bigger things, and I don't remember a ton of their stuff from what I've read, so I'm excited to kind of see more about that. Honestly, most of the other characters, you mentioned Varys last week, so I feel like I've been watching him more intently, and he's really interesting.
Yeah.
They're pretty much anytime Varys and Littlefinger are in a scene together, I freaking love it.
Yeah.
Because they are...
Oh gosh, that scene, it's like, I think it's the second conversation they have in front of the throne.
Where it's just them? Yeah.
And he's like, what is between your legs? I imagine a gash like a woman's. Then later on he has like a callback to that, and he's like talking about how he like lays awake, and he's like, you lay awake at night fearing my gash or something like that. I'm like, this banter is amazing.
Yeah, no, they're really good.
We talked about who's winning, and I think this is, in this batch of episodes, you see Littlefinger and Varys and realize they are small council members who are very powerful and very smart, because you think that they're slimy or they're random, and then you see that they have some underlying power and are in a position where they could play in it at a bigger factor. So they are absolutely like characters that come out. Like at the end, Varys talks to Ned, and they've both now tried to convince Ned, and of course Littlefinger screws him over. He puts a knife to his throat and everything. But they've both now tried to convince Ned that, like, hey, I am not against you, but you are being super naive here. And it was a double cross on one end, and then Varys comes in and does his thing. And what a difficult position for Ned, but what an intriguing game. Those two guys are playing as hard as anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly Cersei like wants power, but everyone else who's about to emerge as like a power player in this is here about this war, and now, but those two guys have been playing the long game, and you see it come out in these episodes, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing with Cersei too is like, she has all the means she needs to get what she wants. Like she hasn't really run into any difficulty.
She is the leg up for sure to start.
They also did some interesting stuff with her.
One of my favorite moments of the entire show happens between her and Robert. It's a conversation that's not in the books. It's she comes into his room, they're just drinking together, and they start reminiscing about like their marriage a little bit, and like
she asks about
Lyanna Stark, and that moment is like, he's like, because she's never talked about her before, and he like brings that up, and she's like, what harm could her ghost do to us that we haven't done to each other 1,000 times over, because they treat each other like absolute shit. And then he talks about her, and like, it's one of the most powerful moments in the show, because like, I love how Robert Baratheon's character is portrayed in the show, and the things they do with his character, and this just kind of like seals it all together nicely, where he just gets like, he's always so loud and obnoxious, and then he has this quiet, very somber moment where he like, it's almost like he's realizing it himself as he's telling Cersei this. He's like, I can't remember her face. All I know is like the rage that I was filled with, and how being king hasn't filled that void that she left. Mm-hmm. And then they start talking about like their marriage a little bit more, and like Cersei confesses that like she did love him as much as like she could at the time. She was like a little girl like Sansa who wanted to marry the king. Yeah. And then she asked like if there was ever any moment where he felt the same towards her, and he's just like, nope.
Yeah.
But not in like a stab at her, in like a, I almost feel like guilty for admitting this, but no.
Well, and like, I think it's funny because like in that scene, it's almost easy to read that as her being manipulative again. But she mentions that same thing again when she's talking with Ned in the garden, when Ned like tells her that he knows. And she brings that up again, like that whole thing. And it really does, like, it paints a picture of like a very like, it paints a more like 3-dimensional picture of Cersei than we've seen before that.
Well, she talks about how much she loves her kids, and she says the famous line in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. And she admits to Jaime being the father of her children, which is a good subversive thing that this show and George R. R. Martin does is they make that seem like that might be a drawn out thing, but it very quickly comes out, and she seems to almost be giving herself permission to have this rage and to work forward by saying it's for her family and by Robert not loving her. And so that conversation between her and Ned, and that's when she tells Ned he's doing everything wrong, and he continues to try and do it that way. And then Ned and Robert's conversation where he doesn't tell him, but he has him sign the letter, and he's not quite ready to go along with Robert's plan. He can't tell him the absolute truth, and it's painful. And Robert has, well, first of all, I like how he just says titles, but he has so many great moments, and he's only in this many episodes. Like, that's it.
Yeah, that is honestly, Robert in the show is 100% exactly how I read him in the books. Yeah, like that is like one of those characters that I think is so nailed, and like the tone of Robert's character is so important, I think, especially to the beginning of this story, of like understanding all these different characters. Like, he brings such an insane energy and charisma to like the show that I think without that, it's hard to get that from a lot of other characters. I mean, Ned is charming in his own way, and like Cersei and Jaime's stuff is like incredibly interesting, but really the people that I felt the most charisma from, I think it's Tyrion and Robert. Because Robert's just like, he hates being king, and he just like, you know what I mean, but he also what else would he do?
He relishes
the
power and what it allows him to do.
But yeah, he's such an interesting character.
That scene where he's like harassing Lancel Lannister,
oh my gosh,
oh yeah,
with the breastplate stretcher and stuff, is pretty great.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be fat, and then he calls him fat. Oh man, it is rich. The way he goes. I mean, he's a fantastic run, and Ned as well. Like you said, he is this character that I think we know well, and yet Sean Bean makes him work, and he makes you still want to root for him and root for good and honesty and like doing the right thing. And even though you want him to sink to their level and start playing their game, and it's just a fascinating back and forth between these power plays that are going on.
Yeah, for sure.
So I can't remember as far as where these episodes leave off. Where is Jaime?
So the last time we've seen Jaime is in the tent with Tywin, and then he leaves, and we know that he is on one front of the battle and Tywin is on the other.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where we're at with
him. Exciting. Like when Rob is pissed and calls the banners, like I was like, I know we've watched 8 episodes really fast, and that is a huge chunk of this story already. Yeah. But when he calls those banners, like I was so hyped,
dude.
Yeah. I was like, let's go! The war is already beginning.
Yeah, the feast scene where he basically proves his mettle as like a leader, when he's just like won't let that guy. That guy's like, if I can't lead the army, I'm not going. I was like, well, screw you then.
Yeah.
And then the wolf bites that guy's fingers off. He's like, you guys are some crazy puppies. I'll come to war with you. Like, okay, like it really is. I mean, this is the deep south. The north is the deep south.
Rob is not. I was blown away when I found out he's not a perspective character in the books, because he could easily be a very one-note character, and I actually really enjoy hanging out with him. And also, I just watched Bodyguard, which is that actor, and Richard Madden, and I really enjoy him. And I think he takes an everyman princely feel, and I want to root for him. And one of the best moments in these episodes is when at the end his mom shows up to camp. She's left the area, and she comes to see him at his little war council, and he has this moment where he is this little boy again, and he wants to just like say, what a relief, my mother, who has always been above me in this world and leads me and I know loves me unconditionally, is here. And she kind of gives him this look, and he stops himself when he says mother, and kind of has to hold back and seem official. And then once everybody leaves and they have a moment, he just holds her, and it's like, he's 14 or 15 in the books.
I think 15.
Yeah, he's 15 or 16.
I imagine they're still thinking right now he's like 17 or 18.
Yeah.
He's not been aged up that much, but for him to now be the king in the north and have all that responsibility, and then have that moment with his mom, like, it brings you back down to see how much has happened, set off by Bran being hurt, and then Tyrion being taken because of the explanation that they believe Bran or Tyrion's responsible for Bran's accident, and then what they did to Ned. This is just the domino effect has exploded so quickly, and you see these characters adjusting, and it's super like that is what this show does so well. Is I believe these characters and the way the story's moving along. Like there are always going to be mistakes in such expansive storytelling, but man, it is well handled for a story to explode like this and just see these people change and believe it.
Yeah.
Even though the writing has to be amazing because you only get so much time with each character, and they have to develop.
No, I think Rob and the actor they got to play him,
Richard Madden, I should say,
feels very much like this is Ned Stark's oldest son.
Yeah.
Like he tries to emulate him, but is like flawed in his own ways, and is his own character. But you see him trying to be his dad.
Yeah. Well,
and
it's interesting because I think that's an especially interesting aspect of that character because we've learned very quickly that this is not a world for Ned Starks anymore. Like Ned Starks will not survive. What is going to come?
It's like someone who thinks they're good at this is a weird metaphor. Someone who thinks they're good at business opening the best store. That doesn't matter. I'm sorry. What's your online store look like, homie? Like, what's your marketing? What are you doing on Instagram? Like, it really is someone completely out of their element, and now you have to see everyone else catch up and see what they... Because, like we talked about Varys and Littlefinger, they've been plotting for this. Like, Cersei, we kind of know has been plotting some things, but they have been ready for this breakdown and are ready to play this game, and the good guys might not be because they were trying to think more good and innocent.
Right.
A character who I really... I wouldn't say is necessarily underrated, but no one really thinks about a lot, I feel like, is Maester Luwin, the Maester at Winterfell.
Yeah.
Because once everyone's gone, he picks up that father role for a little bit Robb before he leaves, and then to Bran especially, and Rickon. And I don't think there's like a handful of moments where I've gotten like pretty emotional in the show. He's in a good chunk of them, and like everything ranging from just like getting chills to wanting to weep.
Yeah.
And that moment you were talking about where Robb has to call the banners. He's like, call the banners, and Mr. Lewin, like, there's this moment where he has this look on his face like he's really proud of Robb, and he knows it's the right choice, but he still wants to be like the voice of caution. So he like kind of questions, like he's like all of them, but you can tell he's like smirking, like yes, like this is what we have to do. In that moment, I was like, oh man, like
it happened so quickly that it's like we got to go into full war mode now. And then Bran's left in charge, and it is interesting that Robb is trying to protect Bran from 3 wildlings with Theon before, and he needs Theon's help to win that. And all of a sudden, from there, he has to say goodbye to Bran, who is now the only Stark in Winterfell. And he's got to call the banners, and now it's just, like you said, it's Bran and Lewin holding down Winterfell.
Right.
Yeah, and like...
wait, and Theon. Theon's still there.
Is he?
Yeah, well, I mean, Theon's still at Winterfell.
Oh, right.
Yeah, harassing Tonks.
Just being an asshole.
Yeah.
My
favorite is there's a scene where Robert is with 3 prostitutes and Jaime's guarding the door, and Jory comes to deliver a message, and they bring up Theon. He's like, he's a good lad. And Katie and I just look at each other like, what the hell? Who is this guy I've been hanging out with? Like, yeah, Theon's the scum of the earth.
Yeah.
But yeah, Maester Luwin has great moments, and there's a few more to come that are just like, gut-wrenching, and that like just his having to take that role as like the dad of Winterfell is a really kind of almost like a downplayed moment. I feel like when people talk about that part of the show, and
he does get. I've never met someone who has as much interest in Lewin as you've just expressed, and I don't think you're wrong by any means.
Yeah.
Like he definitely jumps into that, and I think it's so underrated and underplayed, and you don't really see it that way because he doesn't assert it in that way, but it comes across so much more.
Well,
subtly.
I think that's one of the things I like most about the show, and that's why I bring up characters like Varys, even though he's bigger than Lewin, but like, and Lewin is because the first time watching it, that was one of the first things that hit me. It was like, man, so much details put into so many characters, and they all feel really well crafted, and they all feel very real, and they all feel like they have their own motivations and everything. When with such a large cast, I feel like is the only time I've ever seen that on that scale. Katie and I one time went through and tried to count how many characters we knew the names of. We got over 100 characters that we knew the name of and had some importance to the story.
Yeah. Game of Thrones has a pretty deep bench for sure. Like,
and they like very quickly in season 2, new characters will start to arrive, and like people die, but not. I mean, the show definitely grows more than it kills for a good bit, and it's fascinating how different. Like what I like about later on is different characters you love that pair up, but that starts happening fairly quickly, and you see people who started. Everyone starts together pretty much at Winterfell in episode 2, but very quickly they disperse, and then the ways and places they reconnect, and the minor characters who become so interesting and tied to a more of a main perspective character is awesome. Yeah. You took so many. Are those all from these episodes?
Yeah, these pages are.
You're a note beast.
Yeah. This is how it me keep straight. I think I mentioned to you.
No, I think you need.
This is taking notes helps me not look at my phone. While I'm watching stuff,
the show,
I still have a hard time with sometimes.
Millennials.
Fucking millennials, hate them. But yeah, I think that like with that, there are a lot of like interesting things. When Robert dies, the number of plots that are all happening at the same time is really striking, and like. The stuff with Renly, I think is really interesting.
My first watch had no idea of I did not really think of Renly until it, and what it's like, oh come on, Ned, listen to Renly. Yeah, well, he's more than a manscaping expert.
And, Renly leaves, you know what I mean, which is that's a moment that watching this show that I mean I kind of knew what was coming, obviously, but that's a moment where your heart kind of sinks because
Well, and they just say it too. They're like, he's like, "Where's Renly?" And he's like, "They snuck out the back gate this morning with 50 men." And it's just a throwaway line, kind of, but it always my heart sunk every time that happens. Yeah. I've seen it 4 times, and I'm like, "Oh, that moment has impact."
Yeah.
Well, and I want to ask you at this point, what do you think of Stannis Baratheon?
I mean,
he's not in the show yet.
No, he's not. But they talk about him a lot more than I remember.
Yeah, they do talk about him a lot.
He's the king's other brother, and I just am like.
I mean, I'm interested.
Why is he talked about so much?
I'm interested to see him in the show for sure, because, I mean, he's the next Baratheon brother that could take the throne. But everyone's like, yeah, but Stannis can't talk so good, so probably not. Let's not let him be king. Basically.
Okay. I mean, I know we haven't watched it yet, but the guy who plays Tywin Lannister and the guy who plays Stannis, I am so floored by their performances.
Yeah,
because they are scrawny men who command the screen, and I am intimidated by their characters. But then I see interviews with them in real life, and I'm like, you
little British theater actor. If you would have been a theater actor 100 years ago, you would have played a woman.
Yeah, it's weird. What's it, Charles Dance plays Tywin Lannister? There's an interview with him. He's wearing a jacket my dad would have worn. He's curled up in this chair. I'm like, you frail old man, how are you playing this character?
That's awesome.
So good, so good. We have not talked about Daenerys very much.
Oh yeah, we should definitely talk about Daenerys.
She's someone we praised in the first 4 episodes for how much character growth she had, and I feel like in these she is less. She asserts herself very much, and we see that by her putting her brother in his place, and eventually letting the call kills him, and she's kind of fine with it. She's like, you aren't a dragon, you wouldn't have burnt.
Yeah.
Which is still this weird attitude that she still has this belief in her dragon blood that is super interesting. But then she sees...
Which has kind of been reaffirmed with the scene of her with the eggs and the fire. You know what I mean?
We've had 2 now, because she gets in the bath in the beginning of the pilot. And but then she is really resistant to seeing this rape and violence that is the Dothraki way, as they sell slaves and... that you take your spoils, and that means taking women, and she takes these all aside, and a lot of the Dothraki don't like it, and it's this point where she is already advanced from being just this frail girl to taking a command and getting the trust of Khal Drogo, and they have their whole moon and stars crap, and now she's been put in this powerful but unsure position.
Yeah.
So wait, I just want to make sure we don't go anything that you haven't watched yet. Where's the last part with her you've seen?
I think it was her bringing all the women back to Khal Drogo and him fighting that guy.
And then he gets the cut on his boob.
The guy cuts his boob, and then she has someone come over and heal him. But the whole the idea is that guy wants his spoils, and
Yeah.
And she defends.
Which is just another reminder from last week. The Khal Drogo is still a terrible person because he was defending the rape.
This is such a great character for that actor. I mean, that's about all you can expect. Also, she picked up Dothraki very quickly.
Okay, that's one of my favorite moments in these episodes, actually, is when she's talking to Khal Drogo, and she keeps referring to, like, the Seven Kingdoms, like, the dirts, where I was born and stuff.
The lands,
and he corrects her, like, that was the thing that I was like, I don't know if this is just a weird, like, choice that they made as far as, like, making their language really primitive, but then he's like, no, we have a word for that, and it's this. Like, that was a really cool moment that I don't like. That's just a moment that you don't see in a lot of shows as far as language. Like, mostly it's either people like stumbling through language and saying something that people think is humorous and then laughing and moving on, or it's like, I need to learn this language. Glad I know this language, and then they just know it, and But that's like a really cool, like, little subtle detail that I think was really great.
Something, and I don't know if other people share this opinion, but there's moments in this show where I think her acting is better when she's speaking in Dothraki.
Yes.
Like, I just feel like the emotion part of her performance, I feel, is more, which is weird. Maybe it's because she's focusing on getting the language right that she doesn't overdo it like she does sometimes. And I don't know, those moments, there was just something watching it this time that I noticed that I was like, huh.
She gets a lot of praise as an actress in this, and even other things. And she has some high highs. She does have some low lows, and I think it evens out. But once in a while, she really pulls through. And like we talked about, believing that character arc. You definitely are. I like her world, of course, because it's different. It's in Essos. It's very separate. And I think she does bring it to life. And I was cringing when she wanted to do things, like, even though she was doing the right thing, she wanted to stop the Dothraki, because I'm just like, hey, don't let them do their, like, you don't just try and mess with someone's culture, like, don't try and change everything. You're good, mostly because I'm like, it's going to put you in danger. It is not the smart thing to do. Like, lay low, go with the flow.
Which we have already
I don't endorse the bad things.
Which we've already seen, like, with that scene we just talked about, like, it is kind of putting her out of favor with a lot of the other Dothraki.
Yeah.
Khal Drogo's still on her side, but, like, his second in command is pretty pissed with her.
Yeah.
But as long as you get... Everyone likes the name of the baby, and I think that's going a long way.
It is,
like,
yeah.
You know, every time you piss it off, we're just going to chant, Rhaego, Rhaego. Rhaego.
Daenerys is she's a PR expert, I feel like. She knows when to give the people what they want, and when she can go a little bit further and kind of totally change their traditions.
Well, kind of going along with what you said, when she, like, is like, the name of my son's going to be this, I was like, whoa. What does he have to think about this? Yeah. Like, with this culture, you think that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So that...
no, my son's name's going to be Horse's Dick. I'm pretty sure.
That stuff's pretty interesting. I'm glad I don't have to see Viserys anymore. That scene's pretty great.
Yeah.
That's a pretty great way to end an episode. Yeah. We definitely saw, like, we're seeing a lot more, like, named character deaths in these episodes. Like, Jory Castle gets stabbed right in the eyeball. The way that the
Lannisters take out the Starks people and, like, don't just banish them or try and prison them, they kill a lot of people really quickly, like, in the throne room as well. I'm just like, dude, that, like, people should be pissed. Like, Jory matters.
Yeah.
Rob thinks of Jory as, like, an uncle figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that scene where Jaime confronts Ned Stark in the street. The first time watching it, like, I was so overly invested in this show the first time I watched it. Like, I mean, the show was, like, beyond critique for me at that first viewing, just because I was so hooked that I, like, was so emotionally invested. I was so mad at Jaime at that scene. I'm like, King Robert better freaking kill this bastard. Like, I was like, there's no way he's getting away with this. And it's like, he's fled the city. I'm like, shit. Go get him.
The way they lie and set him up and the stab in the back, which Ned holds his own. And, like, so classically, this is not spoiling anything. Jaime is thought of to be one of the great swordsmen in the Seven Kingdoms right now, and maybe even in the history. And there's also, like, Ned has fought some great swordsmen before and been in great fights, and he holds his own. And every time I watch that, I forget. I'm like, oh, how does Jaime pull this out and cut his leg? And then that dude spears him. I'm like, you mother piece of
yeah, that's the worst.
Oh, man.
All right, so we touched on Arya. She does not have a lot to do yet, but I can see why she's so instantly a fan favorite. Mm-hmm. And then Sansa gets put into like, you hate Sansa, but what her story in this episode becomes, in this episode run, becomes very important because she's like trying to defend her father, but she does not want to lose the possibility of being queen. So she writes to her brother Rob and says, "Come and swear fealty. Dad is a traitor." And she's put in this tough position, but she's also this immature little girl. So it's hard to hate her, but man, you hate her.
And most of it's just like, I appreciate what the character does in the story. It really, man, every time she speaks a line, it just grates on my nerves, though. I just...
Like her performance, or...
I want to have his babies.
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like...
Because her performance
is...
gets worse as the series goes on, I feel like.
Yeah,
I disagree.
I mean, she's really young in this, and I don't particularly like the stuff that's written for her to say, and I definitely don't like the way it's delivered. So, like, I get... It's one of those things where it's like, it's hard for me to say it's bad because it's doing its job.
I mean, that's a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
That's what...
And that's how she's... I think that's how she is in the book, too. She's this whiny, annoying little princess wannabe.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that in the book... there's just more time to spend with that.
Yeah.
And you get that there's actually a lot more conflict for Sansa in the book. At least that she, like, discusses with her, like, handmaiden or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
she does have a best friend in the book that is there all the time.
And so you kind of understand her a little bit more. It is just jarring to see, like, she is so different from her siblings in a way that's a little hard for me to swallow at first, because the idea that she was raised in the North by Ned Stark and Catelyn Stark and turned out like a little brat.
Yeah,
she read those princess stories as a girl. She admired the South, and she knew her family was important, and that, like, this idea of nobility was always intriguing to her. Like, she's also the only one who inherited her mother's hair color. Like, there's just enough that, but I completely believe, like, she's a different from her siblings. It's hard to swallow, but, like, to me, she's just being an insecure, annoying little girl, and that's real.
I just think it's hard because I wish that there was more time spent with her to make that moment a little more meaningful, because she's surrounded by characters that we have grown to understand in subtle ways, and that is not done for Sansa
zero
in these
subtlety.
episodes. They're like, these first 8 episodes, I can't think of, like, a really meaningful scene. I would have loved to see a scene alone with her and Ned. I think there might be one, but I think that the scene where Ned and Arya talk is such an incredible scene, and one that helps me to immediately understand who Arya is, what she thinks, what she actually really thinks of her father, and that she really loves him. You know what I mean? Most of what we've seen with Sansa is so kind of surfacey, teenage angsty up to this point.
She hates her parents.
Makes it hard. Yeah, but that's the thing. No teenager just hates their parents. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Is I just wish there was a little bit more, and you get that in the books. I just wish there was 1 or 2 more scenes with Sansa, because I think that makes the moment, that scene with her and Cersei, that much more powerful.
Yeah, when she's kind of pleading.
I don't know. I'm kind of, I feel like in between that. I feel like, I don't think, and I know you didn't say this, but I don't think she's a bad character. I don't think, like you said, I don't think she's a particularly deep character. I think she is and this goes into more books and seasons later, I think she is a stronger character in the book. I think she's handled better in the book on all accounts. But I don't think she's bad. I think what I'm saying, like, I agree with you that she is supposed to be that 14-year-old girl. I see where she is coming from.
That's what I was like as a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, no, exactly. But the thing that, I don't know, like, the thing that gets me about her is, like, I hate her as a person. So, like, I'm fine with her as a character. I don't love her as a character, but I'm fine with her. But I hate her because before she gets put into a really, really tough position, she's just a brat. And she is a brat up until that point. And then from that point on, it's not really anything of, like, her learning how to change so much. It's just her suffering.
Yeah.
And trying to survive, which you then feel bad for her because it's like she really has it the worst out of anyone for a while.
Hey,
like,
a horse needs to be broken before they can
Yeah.
run their fastest.
but
Also, she's marrying Joe Jonas, so who's the real winner?
we'll get into my rebuttal in 4 seasons. Yeah, that's what kind of bothers me the most about it, is just like, I don't know, I don't feel like we get a chance for a while to really get what you're wanting out of it, because it's just brat. Oh, I need to lie my ass off to not get killed. And that's it. That's all there is.
Well, and I mean, the big thing is, like, she's one of the weaker characters. Like, she's surrounded by characters that are much stronger and interesting.
And
than
that's
she is at this
going
point.
to happen in the story.
So, yeah.
I think the one we barely touched on is John up at the wall. And something important, I think, in the bigger scheme of things happens, but also John is such like an angst. He's like freaking Harry Potter in 5th year. Like, some of it works for me, but he's hanging out with his buddies up at the wall, and
I mean, I definitely think Hot Topic sold more Jon Snow stuff than any other stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no way they sold
absolutely.
anything.
But he's up there. He hears about what happens through the grapevine, and you're supposed to move on from your family. First of all, he just found out Benjen, his horse, has come back without him. So he's worried about his uncle. He just found out he's a steward instead of a ranger, which is kind of the reason he joined the Night's Watch, thinking that was a heroic thing he could kind of do. Which,
can we say, Sam is really growing up. I love Sam because he's such an innocent and pure in this world of terrible. But like that scene where he's like, I always wanted to be a ranger, and Sam's just like, I always wanted to be a wizard.
I kind of knew where I was.
Sam is like one of those people that I feel like, at least up until this point in the show, he's a character that is constantly going to be underestimated by the people around him, because he's not Tyrion. He's not that like witty or clever, but he is smart, and he's definitely not a physical threat. And so I expect to see him surprise people. You know, he's a character that I think will constantly be surprising the people around him. And we see a little bit of that when they bring the body in, and he mentions the thing about it not smelling.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh yeah."
Well, I think also like a moment I really like that's humorous but also shows that quality in Sam is when John's super pissed that he's not a ranger, and he like goes off to brood, and Sam follows him, is like trying to explain it, and like Pip is with them, and then like Pip hears John bitching, and Pip's like, "You want to know why I'm here?"
Oh yeah.
The Lord of my wherever I belong to, I can't remember. He's like I was his singer, and he tried to jerk me off, and I said no, and so it was either death or the wall. He's like, and Sam's like, I thought you were caught stealing a wheel of cheese for your sister. And he's like, who's gonna like believe, like who? I'm gonna tell a bunch of people that my Lord tried to touch my cock. And Sam just kind of looks at him. He's like, will you sing me a song? Because it's like this humorous moment, but it's also, he knows he wants to get rid of Pip at that moment, and he knows that's what's gonna do it. And so Pip storms off angry, and that's when he tells John, like, look, he wants to groom you for command. And I'm such a great moment for Sam.
Smart of Sam. And Sam also is already endearing himself to John by, he went and he just said, hey, the new gods have never done anything for me. So he swears his oath with John in front of the old tree, which
that's a cool moment too, when they ask
the
about
time
the
he did it, I was
gods,
like,
and John stands up, and then Sam's like, I'll do it too. Like,
okay,
it's just,
sidekick.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing though, is like, it's fun to see a character who like sees the world through a lens of just like, this guy needs a friend. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, this guy needs someone to be in his corner, and like, even though Sam needs people in his corner too, you know what I mean? And like, but he has got, like, John did that for him earlier, and like, it's just a refreshing thing. I think it's kind of a fun relationship for sure.
I think the Wall and John kind of get a lot of crap from people, where like, I think it does work a little bit better in the books where John is 15, and it's a lot more believable. It's like, oh, I can see where he's coming from, being this angsty, like, and especially like, in all honesty, he's written well. He is the bastard of it. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like when, like, first world problem type of thing.
Yeah,
but like, that doesn't make those things not real for people, you know? Like, he has that place of not fitting in, being a bastard of Ned Stark. And so, then going to the wall and then being surrounded by just pieces of crap, having a little bit of superiority complex for a 15-year-old is very believable.
Right.
Like, so it works a little bit better in the book, but I still am on board with him for, I mean, him and Emilia Clarke, their acting gets better as the series goes on. But yeah, I don't know. It does have, you mentioned it earlier, the wall has a Hogwarts vibe for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I see that. Yeah.
And I enjoy the wall the same way I enjoyed the first Harry Potter book, like just the learnings of the school and everything.
Well, I think it's like, it's funny you mentioned Hogwarts, because I think it is like the most directly connected to magic we are at this point, or like some unknown supernatural force.
Unknown,
and that is interesting.
Well, and in this first season, as far as magic or things that are out of the ordinary that you would not find in a medieval series, we know dragons were real. That's fact. But they started to get small and stunted, and there wasn't much going on. But then there's a whole bunch of lore. They talk about the children of men or what's beyond the wall, but we have not seen a single bit of something magical or supernatural yet. I want to point these out just because we know what's beyond the wall is important, but at the beginning of the series, it's not addressed. It's not really looked at. It's very subtly hinted at, and I'm noticing more of those things now. Like, obviously that the zombie thing that comes after the Lord Commander, John is able to kill with fire after he stabs it and doesn't die, and Sam's like, you gotta burn it, and there's this thought to what this is, and that's how the series actually kicks off, is there's this symbol, and there's these scary dead things, and we know that there's this danger and something going on beyond the wall, and then Tonks...
What is her name?
Her name is Asha.
Osha.
Okay.
Which is very confusing because in the book there's also a character named Osha, but they changed her name for the TV series. But so Asha kind of is like, we came south because there's crap going, like there's a fear stirring, and so the whole thing is winter is coming and this stuff is going on, but it's so slow played and well hinted at now that I look back at it. But Tyler, like, for someone who you've read a little bit in this, you know what's important, but do you pick up on those little things that there's maybe a bigger danger out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing too is like the very first scene of this show we kind of talked about is like a horror movie, right? It's you see what's beyond the wall for a split second.
Yeah.
And then it does get kind of lost in the minutia and mundane other things that are happening and all the political intrigue. I do think there are a couple things I picked up on. I mean, she is almost every scene that she's in, she mentions stuff beyond the wall.
You sat at the wall, you're a southerner.
Very good.
That was your best woman impression so far.
But then also, the name Mance Raider is dropped a couple times. And there is, and I mean, with the hill people, is that
the hill tribes?
The hill tribes, yeah. Like, it does hint that there is. I think so much of this show has been about you understanding the connections, who's affiliated with what house.
Yeah.
And then there's also this whole other level of like, then there are these other people who are like uncultured, or I don't know, like I feel
they're not part of this nobility.
Yeah, I feel like nobody talks about them very much because they're not thought of as important. And like, also the idea that there are people living beyond the wall, this show, it makes that so incredibly hard to believe because there's a giant wall, and it's so cold, damn cold up there. Yeah, they don't have parkas. Their North Face hasn't been invented yet. What are they doing? So that stuff is interesting to me, and it's hinted at enough that it stays on my mind. And obviously, like, a lot of the interesting stuff that's happening at the wall also has directly to do with that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well done though, and it's crazy. Just in talking about this, I'm remembering that first scene of the show because I'd kind of forgotten about it.
When I rewatched the show, I completely forgot that I remembered the beheading that Ned does at the beginning, but I did not remember like, oh, we start with that guy being beyond the wall and running the scary thing, and
it's a long sequence. Like, it's not like
very much so.
It's not like a little 2 or 3 minute like tone setter. It's a pretty substantial scene, and like
I can't remember. Do the other seasons, every first episode, start with an intro like that where it doesn't go to the title screen immediately, or is it just that first episode?
There are only a handful of episodes with what I would call a cold open.
Okay.
That come before the... But it does happen again, and I think it's important. When it does.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were going somewhere with that, I think.
Oh no, I just I think it does. I think it does a good job of keeping that stuff present enough that it's not going to be so jarring when that stuff comes to a climax.
Yeah.
But also letting us focus on the more interesting parts of the story right now, which is a lot of the stuff at King's Landing and all that.
An interesting thing about watching this 4 episodes at a time, just to look from an outside perspective of a show, is that you were going to watch this. First of all, 9 and 10 are always the most, like the last 2 episodes, I think it's well documented in a show, are generally the most important. And so you're going to see those, and then as bingers, even if you weren't watching for a podcast, you would probably jump right into the next one. You don't get that anticipation. Right. So what I wonder is, what do you... I know you know the climax, but when I watched these seasons, the second time I went back and thought, okay, what episodes were just setup episodes? Or were kind of more for building and may have not lived up. There were not great moments, or there was just a great moment at the end. Did you notice any lulls here in the story, or... did you feel like it was pretty a succinct build up to now we have a finale coming?
I mean, I think there's a pretty good build up. I would say the episode that ends with Viserys' death, that's a lot of setup for stuff to come. And Viserys is also one of those characters that, like, I feel like from the first 10 minutes you see him, you're like, this guy's not going to be around long, because I don't want to watch him, and also no one likes him. So, like, especially in this world, he is not long for it. You know what I mean? Like, and so, I mean, I think that stuff's interesting. And the stuff with Daenerys, we talked about that a lot in the first 4 episodes. It is interesting to watch that transition. Now the stuff with Daenerys is like, okay, now I'm ready for these. I'm waiting for these things to collide in a bigger way, which they do a little bit with her assassination attempt and stuff like that.
Right. We didn't talk about that.
But we still haven't seen, like, characters from these worlds interacting with each other, except for that brief scene with Varys and Illyrio.
Yeah.
That Arya
whispering
is dropping on them.
Which is super interesting, and, like, I never picked up on that until the next time I watched it, when I realized, oh, this guy went east to west.
Right, yeah. And
that scene's in the book, but it doesn't, since you're not seeing it,
right,
it's not as clear that that's Illyrio.
You don't know who it is, right?
Yeah. Like, I think there might be a slight hint to it,
right,
just because of what they're talking about, but, like...
I think she says he has a Braavosi accent like her water dancer teacher.
Yeah, and so when you see it in the show, you're like... If you'd read the book before, you're like, holy cow. And...
Right. It's fascinating, but
yeah. So I feel like that episode kind of, like, was a little more Daenerys heavy.
Yeah.
And that side of the ocean or whatever, and because of that, it's just kind of a lot of setting up, and, like, as Ned's figuring things out, you kind of know that's building to.
These things are obviously coming to a head.
These are the things that led to Jon Arryn dying, supposedly. Right. You know what I mean? And so, like. So you know that as he, like, every time he takes a step on that, I feel like we are building to something, but it doesn't quite come to a head yet, obviously, in that, you know, and so, but I do feel like that episode sets up a lot of those pieces for the big moves that are made in the last.
I feel like episodes 5 and 6 were a lot of people in rooms talking and building. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, you could see that so much more was happening than you thought. And then episodes 6 and 7, 7 and 8. Is that what we watched? 7 and 8. Like, things do kind of when things start to, like, as long as Robert's alive, things are fine. As soon as he dies, or as soon as, like, you realize those things are going to collapse, very quickly all these different ways that this conflict in King's Landing could go start to pop out, and it actually is quite the roller coaster.
Yeah. I do feel like you saying that this show is a lot of, like, people sitting in rooms and talking, like, triggers, like, this thought of me of, like, it really is, like, an incredibly well cast and well written show primarily. You know what I mean? There's a lot of great things about it. But the fact that they're able to make a fantasy show and throw people in a room and just have them talk speaks a lot to what this show actually is about. You know what I mean? This is like the Mad Men to Lord of the Rings Breaking Bad or something like that. You know what I mean? There's so much more like action in Lord of the Rings. I mean, that's still a pretty slow like thing, and it's not all action, but there are like, this is so much more about intrigue and like manipulation, and those are the things that are interesting in this show, I feel like. And the fact that it can be for long stretches of time just people sitting in rooms and talking, and I want to hear more, says a lot for the show.
Like, you love hearing Tyrion talk, obviously, and some of the most intriguing things here are Ned talking to Robert, or Robert talking to Cersei. That whole triangle of people just talking, that puts you on the edge of your seat, and you might be like, oh, where's the big battle? And there will be battles, but man, those are fun to watch. And it's not like the shows were operating on a small budget, but you do see these worlds expand. But right now, like, you just need a freaking castle and really good actors, and it works so well.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, when I was first starting to watch the show and trying to explain it to Katie, who I was dating at the time, and talking with my sister who had only read the books, we were just talking around the dinner table. I was like, this is a show, like, this is a story, at least, especially like this first season, mostly. It gets less and less so as it goes on, but it's like, minus some of Daenerys' storyline towards the end, you could place this storyline in a non-fiction modern day setting and it would still work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just watched all of Mad Men. That's not a bad comparison for what this show is. You know what I mean? Like, Mad Men is a lot of jockeying for position in very subtle ways and that kind of stuff. And a lot of it does take place in offices and stuff like that, you know? And like, I think that's a hard thing to do. And
that's something I totally forgot. There's not a battle in that first season.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
a whole fantasy book without, well, I guess that's a lie. There is.
Things are a brewing.
But you don't really see that, the battle in the first season, really. It's just kind of...
No, and I'll tell you, just from having read the books, and there are big battles in the books that are shown in the books, not shown in the show, and then there's battles only mentioned in the books that are shown in the show. Like, I think Benioff and Weiss do a fan, and those are the showrunners, and because I read so much about the show and stuff, I just call them that. And one of them is married to Amanda Peet, and he loves to say it. Anyway, they do such a great job at picking what needs to go on screen and laying this story out. And after I read the books, these have to get less faithful to the books. And after reading those, and I do love them, and I love their depth, and I really hope he writes the next one before he dies. I'm like, wow, they did give a story. There are changes I would make, of course, but they did give a fantastic story that stays very honorable to the books while getting really far from them.
Yeah, well, I am a huge believer that, I'm pretty sure you disagree with me on this, that up until about for sure until season 3, I am a big fan of about 99.9% of the changes that they make. They make very smart changes from the book that, in a lot of cases, in my opinion, were better story choices than George R. R. Martin picked in the book.
I agree with you a little bit. Not 99%, but close.
For the first 3 seasons, that's how much I am. Then season 4 comes along, and then, if I'm remembering right, season 5 is the one that just really makes some bad changes.
We'll get there, because you're right.
But yeah, we won't go into it too much, but like...
And this is a show podcast. Like, if you were going to go into the books too much, it is just important to the general world and theory. And there is some more information in the books that is completely faithful to show canon that just helps broaden the world. And this is not a comparison show, but it's definitely worth talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it's I mainly bring it up to praise the show. And even in this first, even though the first season is the closest to the book, I feel like the choices they do make in this first season are just really smart.
And when you love spending time in a world, I'm the type of person, not even to be a full completionist, like, I don't know if I'm going to read, they just released a history, George R. R. Martin just released a book called Fire and Blood, I think, and it's just a history book written from the perspective of a Westerosi historian. It's not a story, it's not a narrative at all. Yeah. And I think that is so cool, and I'd love to read it. I don't know when I'm going to have time, and it's not as interesting as a novel, and there's so much of this world to consume. I was glad to read the books when it was done. Like, I enjoyed spending time in this world that much.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see, like, Tyler praising the show gives me a lot of hope because you were familiar with this. You do love worlds and fiction, and you waited to watch it. And part of it was because this is a cool thing, and it just seemed like I'm just not that intrigued, but I'm very intrigued to see how much you enjoy it, and if you do want to expand like the time you spend in it, because you have annihilated some large worlds, or like hammered your way through worlds that are small over and over again, like like
true.
What am I?
Twin
Peaks.
Twin Peaks, yeah.
Twin Peaks.
I love Twin Peaks.
Anyway, I feel we went on a little bit of a tangent there,
For
but
like almost opposite reasons that I love Game of Thrones. Twin Peaks does almost the opposite of Game of Thrones in everything.
Yeah.
It is inconsistent. It is poorly acted in some cases. It is poorly written in a lot of cases. It is made ugly on purpose for a lot of reasons. It's funny because that Twin Peaks is probably my favorite thing that's ever been on TV. Anyways, we'll talk later.
Maybe that's a future idea for
Maybe
podcast. I don't know. Okay. Did you guys have any final notes, thoughts, moments, lines, jokes, anything, observations that you think are really important about these 4 episodes? Because the next one is going to be the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 2, which I think is actually a really cool way to cover something. So,
Yeah.
What did anything we missed that you guys want to throw out there? Just quick hits.
Just something that's kind of supplemental to this I think is really fun that people should watch is there is a 3-episode arc of South Park that is heavily parodies Game of Thrones, and it's about the console wars between Microsoft and
That's
PlayStation.
awesome.
And it is incredible. There are many scenes of Cartman walking through this very lush garden, talking to people that he's going to betray, and just an old man be like, "What the hell are you doing in my garden?" There's just stuff. It's I actually just watched those again, like just kind of like skimmed through them after watching these first few episodes, and they actually really mirror a lot of really great things in this show. So that's just a fun thing to kind of watch, and it also plays with the idea of George R.R. Martin never ever finishing the books ever. So
sad.
anyways, that's just not that we do recommendations here, but it's just kind of a fun like supplement to watching Game of Thrones if you're watching it right now.
I can't think of any. Has something I'm not sure we talked about. Has John had a reveal conversation with I almost just said his actual name. The Maester at the Wall. No. Okay. Then never mind.
I will say at this point, John is struggling letting go of his family, and we didn't really address that. He's upset about what's happening, and he wishes, and this is like the day after he takes his oath, he wishes he could be helping. Yeah. He wishes he could be helping fight with his brother John.
That's one of the most heartbreaking and like things to like watch is just be like, because I don't know. Once again, I got like super emotionally involved. I'm like, I hate the Lannisters more than anything, and they need everyone, the whole family together. Let them go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Lannisters are so horrible, and you hate them. They're not horrible to spend time with all the time because they are good characters and they're interesting.
Oh yeah, no,
compared
absolutely.
to Varys. But the way that those characters continue to be relevant in the story, because you think, oh, they're the villain, I hate them. But like, it just shows to the credit that you're like, I have to spend time with Cersei. Yeah. It's necessary.
And I love it.
Cersei's performance is incredible. It like reminds me a ton of the first time, like watching the first season of House of Cards. Like Robin Wright's character in House of Cards. So like good. They both play such subtle, terrible people so incredibly well. Like she is absolutely.
You get to see the claws come out a little bit at the end of in this, and when she's just like, I like doing my brother, and I have all the power.
Oh man, yeah. Like I'm not for spousal abuse, but when Robert punches her or slaps her, I was like, oh, thanks, someone did it. Like, and she's like, I'll wear it like a badge of honor. He's like, wear it in silence or I'll honor you again. I was like, you fucking tell her.
On that note, this has been an episode 5. Man, I'm so bad. 5 through 8?
5 through 8.
5, 6, 7, 8. Man, I gotta count on my hands. Oof. Oh, but I'm pretty stoked for next time. We'll drop.
So next time we'll just do 9 and 10, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh,
so let's do. I figured the next episode we'll just do 9 and 10, and then we'll just start in season 2.
Okay.
And that way we can kind of do a season recap, and maybe do some predictions going. I'll do some predictions going into season 2.
I'm excited for this.
Oh, one thing that I was hoping for in this episode. I don't know if it's going to happen, but Rob sets that guy free to go tell Tywin that they're coming for him. I really hope that means that he's taking his army to a different front. I don't know.
You're
if that's
already
the case.
thinking risk. You're already thinking war, which I think is important. I mean, yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
cool.
I don't know if that's the case, but
Yeah.
like him making that big choice to let that guy go with a message. I hope that there's more than false bravado behind it. You know what I mean?
And then what's Umber's like? Are you touched, boy? I was like, what is that insult? What?
He's good. So, okay, great. Well, yeah, we'll see you next time.